Welcome back to the Cover 3 Takeover here on CBS Sports HQ. We are going to be with you all season long, 4 p.m. Eastern time here on CBS Sports HQ, joined by Tom Fornelli and Barrett Sallee, here to get you set for week 0 in college football. A little bit later on, we will be giving you our player to watch, a key matchup to watch for week 0. But before we look ahead to this weekend, we need to get in some of our favorite future bets. I mean, we're talking win totals, conference winners, national championship, and more. So with the entire board laid before you, Tom Fornelli, if you were to single out one win total bet, we've gone through them all on the Cover 3 podcast, as everybody knows, but what's the one, as we sit here on this Friday afternoon, that you think is your favorite?
My absolute favorite by far is the Arizona State under 6 for the entire season, because it is not a college football season until there is one program that is designated as the dumpster fire for that year. And while Auburn has a chance to claim that title, I think Arizona State is flying under the radar. This is a team that is under investigation by the NCAA, saw a lot of its coaching staff leave after last season. A lot of players, including starting quarterback Jaden Daniels, flock to the transfer portal, and now begins the new year with that NCAA investigation looming, and a lot of questions about Herm Edwards' long-term fit at Arizona State. And pretty much the idea is he's going to be there for one more season, and then there's probably going to be a change. And I think that's very much in play, because if you look at this schedule, Arizona State, they get off to a pretty tough start as far as the schedule is concerned. They have a road game against Oklahoma State. They face Utah at home. They're on the road for USC, and then they get Washington all before their bye in mid-October. So we're looking at a team that could be 2-4 after its first 6 games heading into a bye. And we all know bye weeks, when things get off to slow starts, that's when coaching changes tend to be made. So this is a team that could be quitting for the second half of the season. So I don't think, I picked Arizona State to finish last in the Pac-12. So if I can get an under 6 wins, I will take it, because I don't think it's going to be a fun year for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, Tom, fragility seems like it could be the name of the game at Arizona State, because you're right. 3 top 15 opponents in the first 5 games. I'm going to go with Ole Miss over 7.5, because I think the Rebels are being slept on. It feels like maybe there's too much put on Matt Corral's absence and not enough on Lane Kiffin's presence, and the fact that they upgraded at running back with Ulysses Bentley IV and Zach Evans. They've got an incredibly diverse wide receiving core, and the fact that they just have to be okay defensively, just okay. They were bad last year defensively. I would say they were horrendous last year, and they went to the Sugar Bowl. So if you can just be mediocre, you're going to contend for the SEC West, and the schedule sets up well. I'm not worried about Texas A&M. I'm not worried about LSU. They have a bye week in early November going into the home game versus Alabama. That sets up for one of the wildest atmospheres in college football. We know what happens in Oxford if they can unseat the Crimson Tide. I think they're the Crimson Tide's biggest challenge in the SEC West, and I think from a roster standpoint, it sets up perfectly for Ole Miss to make a run.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to keep it in the SEC with the team that was even on that Ole Miss schedule. No, I don't even need that Ole Miss win to be able to cash that Vanderbilt over, because our Vanderbilt over currently sits at 2.5. And we are sitting here on the edge of being there with win number 1, with being almost there, a third of the way there, if Vanderbilt can take care of business against Hawaii in week 0 in Honolulu. And in fact, I'll say that Vanderbilt's going to have our win total cashed by the end of September. At Hawaii, win. Elon, you may talk to me about East Tennessee State, but they've learned their lesson. There won't be an FCS loss for Vanderbilt this year. That's a win. So then I just need one of Wake Forest at home or Northern Illinois on the road. I think that this Vanderbilt team saw what the bottom is. Clark Lee has done so much to try to rework this roster. They want to be able to take advantage of speed. They want to be able to take advantage of length. They want to be able to take everything that Clark Lee had in his rise as a defensive coordinator and put it in place on the defensive side of the ball. The quarterback position is going to be, I think, finally a position of strength rather than a huge red flag this year. And again, that Ole Miss game, that's intimidating. Alabama, that's intimidating. But Vanderbilt at 2.5, are you kidding me? They have this thing cashed before they even play their first SEC game. I'm going over 2.5 on the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Anchor down. I love it.
Let's go. Big V. New V. Shout out to the general manager of
New
Vanderbilt
V.
football, Barton Simmons. All right, what about when we look at teams that are going to be competing for a conference championship? Because Barrett, you're in on Ole Miss. You went Arizona State under. I mentioned Vanderbilt. We just talked about 3 teams that probably are not going to be winning their conference. So Barrett, you first here. What is your favorite conference champion winner play?
I've got a lot of them, honestly. But to me, look, I think Utah's good value in the Pac-12. I think Baylor is great value in the Big 12. Did we miss the part of the offseason where Dave Aranda forgot how to be a great coach and the defense for Baylor it suddenly became terrible? They're like 5 deep on the defensive line. And that for Baylor is the recipe for success. I love the fact that Dave Aranda named Blake Shapen the quarterback in the offseason, allowing Bohannon to go to USF. It brings together that entire team. So for me, you look at what Baylor is. It's a defensively driven program in a conference that, in terms of offensive prowess, okay, there might be Oklahoma, but it ain't going to be Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma. Yeah, there might be Texas, but I mean, come on, can we really count on Texas being consistent, especially considering what they have defensively? Baylor at plus 650 is flat out insulting to the boys in Waco. Chip and Joe probably are not liking that at all, but I know Dave Aranda likes flying under the radar quite a bit.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that Baylor is the 4th favorite in the Big 12 behind Oklahoma State and Texas after it won the conference last year. But the reason I don't think it's the best value is they do have Oklahoma in their way. So I'm going to go with another one that you mentioned. I'm looking at Utah plus 210 in the Pac-12 because I think Utah is the best team in the Pac-12 this season, and it is the team that won the Pac-12 last year. And its 2 primary competitors are USC, who has a new head coach, a new quarterback, an entirely new offense via the transfer portal, and the same bad defense it had last season when it went 4-8. And an Oregon team that I think is plenty talented, but Mario Cristobal left a lot behind when he went for Miami, but it has a first-year head coach in Dan Lanning and a quarterback in Bo Nix, who is a bit of a roller coaster ride. And then I look at Utah. I see an excellent offense with a good quarterback, a strong offensive line, a strong run game, a sturdy defense, excellent special teams, and they're getting plus 210. That means they only have to win the conference a third of the time. I think they're probably going to win it at least half the time. So this is the best value on the board for conference title futures, in my opinion. Give me the Utes.
Yeah, I love that plus value with Utah. It's my selection as well. If you want to find a very simple recipe for teams that should be able to carry over success from last season, then you can just go down the list. And there's only about 14 or 15 schools that can say, we've got our head coach still in place. We've got our offensive coordinator still in place. For Utah, that's Zandy Ludwig. We've got our defensive coordinator still in place. That's Morgan Scalley. And we have our starting quarterback back. Head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, quarterback. That is going to be the way that you have continuity. And Utah has that in a way that, as Tom mentioned, the other primary contenders absolutely do not. Also, when we start to get into the details of how they get there, Utah's schedule sets up such that the USC game is going to be in Salt Lake City. And I think that game being there is a real advantage for the Utes so that they can get to the Pac-12 championship game. And we finally saw Utah just win the Pac-12 for the first time last season. And with so much continuity, I feel comfortable saying they're going to do it again. And again, like I'm not going to be out here laying these stupid prices on Ohio State. Like Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten. I'm not going to lay one of these stupid prices on Clemson. Clemson's going to win the ACC, but Utah right there at 2-1, I absolutely love that value play. All right, so some of these conference champions are going to be making it to the college football playoff, but maybe your college football playoff prediction doesn't have all conference champions. Tom, I have a sneaking suspicion that your projected college football playoff will raise some eyebrows, especially for about half or so of the Power Five. Who do you think is going to be making it to the very end, hearing their name called on that selection Sunday in December?
Gentlemen, what was the story of the entire college football offseason? It was the inevitability of the 2 super conferences. Once USC and UCLA announced they were joining the Big Ten a year after Texas and Oklahoma announced they were going to be joining the SEC, we were all staring in the face a future of college football that is just the Big Ten versus the SEC. and whatever's left of everybody else. Well, Notre Dame is currently the one bulwark in the way of that becoming reality, as Notre Dame is maintaining its independence. But I think that's the future we're going to see in the college football playoff this year, because I look at the Big Ten and I see Ohio State and Michigan being the two best teams in that conference by far. I look at the SEC, I see Alabama and Georgia being the two best teams in that conference by far. And I think that when Ohio State and Michigan face off at the end of the year, both will be undefeated. The winner will go on to win the Big Ten. The loser will get the 4 seed in the college football playoff. And I think in the SEC championship, it's going to be an undefeated Alabama against an undefeated Georgia, and it's going to be the same situation. My college football playoff field in 2022 is Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Michigan. Big Ten versus SEC.
Tom, I completely disagree with your assertion, because I think you're going to get 4 different conference champions in there this year. Last year we had 2 SEC teams. The year before, Notre Dame and Clemson technically were both ACC teams. I think this year, I love your first 2, Alabama and Ohio State. There's no reason to try to outthink the room. Alabama's going to go undefeated. Ohio State's probably going to go undefeated. But at number 3, I like Clemson. I think everything's set up well for Clemson, including the quarterback position, because if DJ Uiagalelei falters, here comes Cade Klubnik, a lot like Trevor Lawrence did as a true freshman. So I think Clemson's going to be fine. An easy ACC schedule, the best defensive line in the country, and a great running back in Will Shipley. And number 4, at the risk of this becoming the Utah special of the Cover 3 takeover, I got the Utah Utes. I think they fall somewhere along the way. But think about this. They get Florida on the road next weekend. Yeah, it's Florida. We don't know exactly what they are, but going on the road to the Swamp in September is going to sit well if they get a win, especially a big win with that selection committee. It's not like San Diego State's a weak opponent in week 3, and then if Utah is able to go out there and knock off USC, Oregon, UCLA, and a couple other ranked teams in the Pac-12 along the way, I think it'll be a good enough resume. So, and again, maybe Georgia has 1 loss, but without a conference championship. It does matter if you have conference championships, as long as there are other teams in the discussion. And right now, I think Georgia's going to be in a position where it won't have a conference championship, will only have 1 loss, but Utah's resume will be enough to get the Utes in.
Okay, let me take, and obviously, we've got our picks on CBSSports.com that are coming out on Monday, so you can hold our feet to the fire on this. But I'm gonna take a little bit of Tom, and I'm gonna take a little bit of Barrett, because again, we're not gonna outthink the room here. I'm going Alabama at number 1. I'm going Ohio State at number 2. I'm going Georgia at number 3. I do think that we have that 12-0 scenario that Tom laid out in terms of the SEC championship game. But I'm going with the Clemson Tigers at number 4. And the way that I see this is that it will be Clemson, it will be Michigan, and it will be Utah. That will be the raging debate for who is the last one in. The Clemson Tigers could slip up. They have to go to South Bend to play Notre Dame. They have to play Miami in November. That game is at home, but still, Notre Dame and Miami, these are teams that are both ranked heading into the season, both teams that could be very tough for Clemson to play. And so even if they slip up, I think winning the ACC championship, something that I am projecting Clemson to do, would end up putting Clemson in there. Plus, it is difficult to ignore the selection committee's bias for the teams that continue to show up. Clemson, clearly one of the top returning customers, so to speak, at the college football playoff diner. So with an ACC championship, 1 loss maximum, I do think that Clemson ends up getting in there, sneaking in ahead of Michigan and ahead of Utah. Again, we're all seeing the board very, very similarly here, but give me Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, and Clemson at number 4. So we've all got the same 4, 5, 6 teams all up in the mix that we think will be there in the final college football playoff rankings, but you can only select 1 team to be the national champion. Barrett, I'm going to throw it back to you. Who is your national championship pick?
So, Chip, I've gone back and forth. Like, you could ask me this minute, next minute, I could probably change. So I'll try to answer this right now in less than 1 minute, so my answer doesn't change. But I'm going to go Ohio State. I think right now, look, you have the best quarterback or second best quarterback, depending on what you would think of C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. One of the best running backs in the entire country, still freaks at wide receiver. The problem with Ohio State last year was its defense. They go out, they hire Jim Knowles. I think when you look at what he can provide, not only was he successful at Oklahoma State, but he's got talent at Ohio State. It just wasn't coached very well. It wasn't embraced. So right now, I think that defensive front going to be one of the best in the Big Ten, perhaps even the country. That'll be more than enough to get Ohio State into the playoff. And when they get to the national championship game against who I think will be Alabama, I think they'll have something up their sleeves. That disrespect card will be playing into this a little bit too. So give me the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I'm with you in one sense in that while I don't have the highest of confidence in which team will win the national title, I do think that the national title winner will be either Alabama or Ohio State. But right now, I give Alabama the slight edge. I just think that defensively, I have more of a complete idea of what they're going to look like, and I trust them more. But again, it's kind of a coin flip, and I'm with you, Barrett. Every other minute, I'm kind of changing my mind on which team is better. So right now, I'm going to go for Alabama. Tomorrow, it might be Ohio State. But again, at the end of the year, it's going to be one of those two teams.
So I'm going to go with Ohio State here, breaking the tie for the Buckeyes. And as I look over the on-field stuff, which, by the way, like Oklahoma State was so good at getting after the passer, I expect Ohio State will be great at getting after the passer under defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. And like Barrett said, he will be doing it with better talent. I just think there's also an interesting intangible here in that Ohio State under Ryan Day had not lost a regular season game prior to last season. They were running through the Big Ten. They were running through all their regular season opponents, only falling in the college football playoff, only falling in that bowl game at the very end of the season. And last year was the first time that they faced some real regular season adversity, at least in terms of having to bounce back from a loss. First, there was the Oregon game, then obviously the regular season finale against Michigan. And there's got to be something for Ryan Day as a coach, that coaching staff, and even the team, of which there are many returning stars for 2022, where there is a chip on the shoulder. It seems impossible that a program like Ohio State would be able to establish a chip on the shoulder. But what does Nick Saban, the GOAT, say? Never waste a loss. And I think that those losses last year might help fuel the motivation to close those very slim margins and help power Ohio State to a national championship. Coming up on the other side, we take a look at some of our Heisman Trophy winner predictions. Plus, we look ahead to week 0. Who are the matchups that we're looking at, the players to watch, and what is our absolute best bet for the weekend? We'll get into that and more next.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.